This is a video on how to smoke delicious ribs and brisket. First, you're going to start with a couple of pans that will fit your meat. I like to use this long elongated pan for a brisket. You can see I got a nice sized brisket in here. This brisket's probably I'll say about a 15 pound. It's when you pick out your brisket, you want to get one that's overall it's pretty meaty. It's got a fair amount of fat on it. I personally don't like to trim the fat off of my brisket. I like to leave all the fat on there while it's smoking out on the smoker. It's got a fair amount of fat in here, and of course the backside will have fattiness on it. But I smoke it fat side up on the smoker, and that way the fat keeps it moisture, a lot of moisture in the meat as it's cooking. So therefore I leave it all on, wait and trim it off after it's through smoking. A good size brisket like this, you're looking at probably a good 11 to 12 hours leaving it on the smoker at a heat of about, anywhere from around 250 to 275 is what my smoker heats at when all the settings are set right, and we can go into more of that later. As a little bonus today, I'm also smoking some ribs. You can either use the pork baby back ribs or pork spare ribs or beef ribs for that matter. I typically will smoke pork ribs, and I do a lot of baby backs, but today I'm doing the spare ribs. Spare ribs have a little bit more fat on them. I think they're tastier because they have a little more fat on them, and they're typically a wider rib than the baby backs. The baby backs is the short strip across the, I guess it's called the back strap on the pig, which is a shorter, meatier rib. One big secret on these pork ribs that are, I guess, the most work and the prep work on getting them done is on the back side. There's going to be a membrane film that you're going to have to cut in, and you'll peel it off. It's just a thin layer of skin, but it's very tough. You'll peel that off, and you'll peel it off the entire back side of the rib. You'll see it on there. I like to do it when the pork rib is at room temperature. It seems to peel off a little better than when it's right out of the refrigerator. I do that on all the ribs, and then once you're done with that, the ribs and the brisket are ready for spices. Now, there's all kinds of different recipes for spices you can use on the brisket and ribs. I personally I get this extra fancy salt-free brisket rub here that I like to use, and you want to gingerly place a good fair amount all over both sides of the meat. You can see I've already prepared this, both ribs and the brisket, and then also I added a little extra pepper as well. Now, if I don't use the premix brisket rub, one thing I like to use is just good old-fashioned Lowry seasoning salt, and do a good generous amount over both sides. Once I'm through with that, I'll take and cover this up really good with saran wrap, both the ribs and the brisket, covered up really good in saran wrap. I stick it in the refrigerator, and I let it sit in there for all night long, or 24 hours before I smoke it, so it really gets all the flavoring down into the meat. Once you've done that, then I again, pull them out of the refrigerator. I'll let it set just a little bit after I pull it out of the refrigerator. Let the meat, there's some different theories on smoking the meat right out of the refrigerator, ice cold, versus letting the meat get more of a kind of a room temperature almost room temperature before sticking it on the smoker. There's a theory is that when the meat, when it's not as cold, it kind of opens up a little more. So I'm letting the meat sit here for a few more minutes, and then it will be ready to be placed out on the smoker. More on the smoker to come. So we'll go outside in a minute. I'll walk you through the process of getting the smoker ready so we can put the meat on. All right. And now for part 2 of these smoking brisket and rib series. We come outside to the smoker here. I like using a big barrel type offset wood smoker, so that way you have indirect heat over here with your firebox where all your wood goes, and then of course the meat's all in the barrel smoker. So I start out in preparation. I like to use the hardwood lump charcoal, as you can see there. You don't want to use charcoal briquettes. You want that clean fuel smell, if you will. And charcoal briquettes are not going to give you that clean burn, if you will. So the hardwood lump charcoal burns much cleaner and smoother, and which is what you want, because you don't want any foreign type smoke flavor getting into the meat. At any rate, I take and start out with the lump charcoal. I'll fill my firebox half full, light it, and leave the lid open while it's burning, and wait till you get a good red hot coals. Once you achieve the red hot coals, I take and put apple wood on top of the coals. You can buy various flavors of woods, and feel free to experiment with the different flavors and taste you get out of those woods. But for my particular taste, I think the apple wood gives it a good, nice, medium smoke taste. You don't want to go with mesquite wood. Mesquite wood is going to give you more of a really harsh wood smoke, which might be a little too strong of a wood smoke flavor in your meat. So again, there's cherry wood, all kinds of different woods, but I tend to use apple wood. Speaking with my next door neighbor, ironically, he uses the same apple wood. At any rate, pour you some of that wood in here on top of the red hot coals, and then of course it's going to start smoking quite a bit. And then you want to take your meat and place it in the barrel smoker. You can see I've already got the brisket and ribs placed in there. Brisket fat side up, with the thicker side of the meat closer toward the firebox. You can actually see the coals back in there going. These ribs are about done. When the meat starts pulling away from the bone like that, that means they're about ready to come off. So I'll be taking those off here shortly. It takes a lot of experimenting with your smoker to get it just about right, but I've gotten it down to where after the setup, if I adjust my intake air down here just enough to where I get a little bit of fresh air into the firebox, and then the outtake over here, if you will, I leave it about like that, about half covered up. And that allows me to gauge my temperature, where it'll run anywhere from 250 to 300. Now, of course, I just opened it up, so it dropped it down 50 degrees. It typically runs about 300 degrees while it's cooking. The ribs will take about 7 hours on the smoker, if you will, before they're done. 7 hours is just about right. For the brisket, you're talking a brisket that size, about 12 hours. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, the ribs are ready to come off. You can see they got a good color to them. And so we're going to be pulling those off here shortly. And then once I pull those ribs off in the brisket, what we're going to do to let them finish cooking is you're going to wrap them very tightly in foil and leave them sitting out wrapped in foil in, again, one of these pans. And then you're going to do what's called the stall method, and you're going to let those sit and stall for an hour, and they will finish cooking inside the foil. And that hour that you leave them cooking in the foil sitting out, they'll be really getting that tenderized flavor to them. As I say, the meat falls off the bone on the ribs when they're just right. So we'll be doing that here shortly, and then that will be the end of the series on how to smoke delicious brisket and ribs. Thank you.